Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We're going to talk about Blazor specifically today, and then some of the things you can do with Blazor in terms of, and it's more about app builder data binding, but Blazor is part of that story. But as well, I just want to show a couple things with the Blazor controls in terms of data binding. I've showed this before at a couple webinars. It's pretty cool. And I want to continue to just highlight some of these neat things that you can do. So with us today is myself, Jason Barris. I'm Senior VP of Developer Tools. George is on the line as well. He's the Senior Product Owner, Senior UX Architect, Senior Everything. George has been with the product since day one. And if you're familiar with the Indigo product, he was basically started that product back well over 10, 12 years ago at Infragistics. And then Brian Laguna, same thing, Senior Product Owner's been with the company over 10 years, working on everything that has to do with XAML. Then he moved into mobile. Then he moved into Angular, Blazor, .NET. So all these guys are on the chat and in the Q&A. So if you have questions, please go ahead and use those. They'll be answering everything there. So today's agenda, using Ignite UI for Blazor, using excel2json.io, which is something as well that we have shown before, but Brian just released a new version of it, which is really slick. So we're going to show that, and then we'll talk about App Builder and Real Data and App Builder. A couple housekeeping. Recording and slides will be available after the webinar. There are no slides. This is the last slide for the day, so we're probably not going to send those slides. And yeah, ask questions, but you will get a link to the recording for folks that couldn't make it or folks on your team that you want to see the video. So with that, we're going to go right into a demo just to make it easy. So let's start with, well, first of all, let's close my Outlook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Visual Studio. So what I want to do first is, and it's okay, it's going to open up here. What I want to do first is show you real quickly a couple Blazor features that are pretty slick with the product. And then we're going to jump into the app builder. So I'm going to click Create New Project. And here I am in my Create New Project. And you can see there's a couple recent project types that I've done. I'll show you the ASP.NET Core Web API in a little bit, but I want to do a Blazor app right now. And I just happen to pick Blazor Server app. You could do this with the Blazor Client app, or it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to say Blazor Demo Webinar is the name of my project, and I'll just click Create. And this is an empty Blazor project. And so in order to light this project up with the Infragistics Blazor controls is really easy. And that's what I want to show you. So if you don't care about App Builder, you don't care about that stuff, you just want to use Blazor, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to your project, you're going to right click, and you're going to manage NuGet packages. And then in your NuGet package manager, you're going to go to browse, and you're going to type in Infragistics Blazor, like so. And you're going to see a few things here. This is the Blazor UI controls. There's the documents core, the Excel library. So this is just all of the Ignite UI for Blazor controls. Our latest is 21.2.52. Around the second week of May, we will be shipping 22 dot something. So the next big release is coming soon. We have a bunch of new features in that release. So this, we're about a month away from that. But I'm going to just install this version, and I'm going to accept all this stuff. And that's it. I'm good to go. So now my application it's aware of Blazor. So now there's a couple things that I need to do here. Let me close this guy, save. There's a couple things that I need to do to actually get Blazor going. So in my imports.razor, and the Blazor expert here is Brian Lagunas. I'm not a Blazor expert. I'm not, the detailed MVP that Brian is. So Brian, if there's anything that you want to recommend or suggest, feel free to chime in on the speaker. So what we want to do is we want to tell the application that the Blazor controls should be available to all the pages. So with .NET 6, you have the ability to use these global using statements. This is a .NET 6 app. And so I'm just going to say using Ignite UI Blazor. And then in my program.cs, we've got here the builder. And so the builder is going to take all of these settings or libraries or whatever and pull together, pull them together so they're available to the application. So we have to do the same thing here. So we're going to say builder.services.add Ignite UI for Blazor. So at this point, Blazor is ready to rock and roll. It's in my application. Now I can just use Blazor in any of my pages. So I'm going to reuse index.razor, and we can get rid of survey prompt here.
You're not quite done yet.
Oh, all right.
You need to add the Blazor scripts to the index page.
Well, let me show you this, Brian, because I didn't have to do that and everything worked great. So yeah, let me, I'll do exactly what, what I did, and you'll see. I'm not, because I remember that we had to do that, but yeah, I really don't know why it worked perfectly, but maybe you can tell me if this doesn't work. We know we need to do that. So what I'm going to do here in index.razor is I'm going to add a grid. So I'm going to copy it from my other screen, and I'm going to paste this guy in. And what I want to highlight here is a couple things. And this is why the data binding piece is why I'm showing this, is because of the data binding piece. So the IGB data grid is just the Blazor data grid. And this is how you would add it to your page. But the unique aspect of it is the data source property on this will actually take a URL. So usually you've got a separate service, and you're loading your service into an object, based on a model, and then you're going to read that in, and then you're going to use that in your application. Absolutely, that's great. That's a best practice. Keep doing it. For super simple apps where you just got data out in the cloud or just to test things out, you can just point the data source to a URL with the remote JSON.with_URI, and then you just kind of bang this in like so. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and run this guy, and we'll see, Brian, if we need to add anything here. And it's over on my other screen, and it's connecting to the server, and like magic, this is the data that automatically gets bound to the grid. So I don't have to do anything unique and special to make that thing work. I just point it to a URL and it lights up the grid. And then at this point, I get all of the features of the grid that are built in. So built in automatically is what we call the Excel style filter. And with the Excel style filter, you've got features like, I can do a group by of any field. So you can see here, I've got my sticky headers, and there's my group by. Let's say for country, I want to pin this guy to the left. So now country is pinned to the left. Things like column resizing are all built in. Column moving are all built in. So all of these things are just automatic. Don't have to do anything. It just works. And it's super simple. If I go back to Visual Studio here and I click on this URL, let me move it over. You can see that this is what's coming in from the cloud. So this isn't like some hard-coded data. It's actually real live data coming in from the cloud. Now, this is, I'm going to show you where this is coming from in a second, but at the same time, if I type in my Northwind Cloud .azurewebsites.net/swagger, this is, if you've got any of the webinars or YouTube lives in the last couple of weeks, this again is a web API. It's up on Azure. It's using Azure SQL. It's all the same stuff. So I could take the same URL, paste it in, and I would get the same result. So it doesn't matter if it's, coming from a real cloud database with a web API in front of it, or that JSON, Excel to JSON, it just will work. And now with this, I can do the same thing with charts. So I'm going to go back and copy one of the charts that we have here. The charts are actually really slick, and I'm going to show you why. So let me paste this in. I'm going to leave the grid there. I've got my little break here. So this is the category chart, and we've got remote JSON.from. And if I show you what this data looks like, this is stock data, the date, the open, the high, the low, the close, the volume. Now, the category chart's really smart. It just tries to figure out what data it should render. But what we've added here is the ability right within the category chart HTML is to include or exclude specific properties. So what we want to do when we render this chart with this data is just include open and date. That's all I want to render. And now if I save this guy and we'll run it, and I think it opens up on my other screen here. Yep. So now I've got the chart down here where it went off to the cloud and pulled in this data. And you can see I've got my crosshairs by default. I've got zoom and all this other good stuff. So super simple to do this sort of stuff. And then at the same time, I have one more chart I want to show. And it's just a different data source. So let's go and do the same thing here. And this is another category chart. It's another set of data. And what this data looks like, it's product sales. So I've got category name, product name, etc. What I didn't want to do was actually, I didn't want to do category sales. I wanted to do product sales. So I am going to include the product name and the dollar amount. And that's what I did here, product name and the dollar amount. Now, when I run this guy, and I'll move him over again, sorry about that. Let's scroll down, and you'll see here is this chart, and I got my tooltip on the bottom and all this cool stuff. So like, hey, is this an enterprise app? No. Can I get something POC'd up in less than 5 minutes? Yes. If you watched the webinar last week, I did the master detail with Blazor, or the one from 2 weeks ago, master detail with Blazor, on like wiring up this with this, etc. Just watch that webinar and you'll see how to even take this a step further. Now, all this data, Excel to JSON, let's go and take a look at where all this is coming from. So what I'm going to do, and I encourage everyone to follow along, I'm going to go to Excel to JSON.io. What this does is it allows you to upload files from your computer. Like this is the Excel Northwind database. So I'll just click open, and we will upload that to the cloud. We will create all of the sheets from the data. So you can see here, I've got all of the sheets, suppliers, territories, invoices. And as I click these, you'll notice the JSON is getting created here at the end. Now, up until last week, and if you've seen any of our webinars, you've seen Excel to JSON in a couple of different webinars. Up until last week, there was this share or copy link. And I would click copy link and I would get a link. And then that link is what I would use for my cloud-based URL. Well, now we've got save file. What does save file actually do? It gives me a link, which is cool, but it also gives me a my files area. So what Brian did is he updated this. So all of your JSON files now will be saved. So here's customers, categories, employees. So I clicked save on each one of those tabs like a while ago. And then it just loads up the individual files. So here, if I click stock prices, this is the data that I just showed you in the demo. I clicked this little get share link. I clicked copy. I went over here and I just highlighted this and I pasted it in, and boom, there we go. Now that file name is going to stay the same because it's up in the cloud. So it'll be consistent and it won't change. So this Excel2 JSON is a super awesome way for you to use fake data, use real data, get a schema just to bind to use, your real schema. Like if you have a proprietary database and, you want to generate some fake information, but you want the real schema, just export the schema to Excel and then add your own data. So here, if I go to the main screen, I can actually just start typing here. So I'll type in name, age, and we'll do Brian, 22, and we'll do George, 24, and you can see that it's creating the JSON for me. So even just generating fake data. So now what's cool about this is I'm going to save file, copy this, and I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. Let's go ahead, paste in that URL here. Let's get rid of our included properties. Let's save this. Let's hit run. And now my category chart is actually just going to use the name and the age. So there we got Brian, and something happened there with the data, but there's George. So the other cool thing about the category chart is it will determine the best chart type to use. So in this case, it determined that the best chart type to use is a column chart, and it did it automatically. So pretty slick. Highly recommend you use Excel2 JSON. So now let's go back to Visual Studio. Let me go to recent files here and see if, well, let me just open up a new instance of Visual Studio because I can't find my, let's go here and master details, Northwind Cloud app. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you real quick how this works. So if I open up my browser again and I'm back here, this is Northwind Cloud app, and this is the Swagger definition for my web API in the cloud. So the whole purpose of Swagger is that it is a layer, like a visualizer on top of the open API specification. Well, in Visual Studio, when you're creating a web API, it's generating to this open API specification, and by default, a .NET 6 web API app will use Swagger, and it'll use Swagger UI. So what I did here is I have Entity Framework. I'm using Entity Framework to talk to a database in the cloud, which is an Azure SQL database. And then in order to expose those tables in my Azure SQL database as an API, I went through the Entity Framework Power Tools, which auto-generated a bunch of code, all this like stubbed out data access code that no one really should ever have to hand code. And then I went ahead and determined what the name should be of my API. So in this case, I say app.mapGet, and then I want to tell it what the actual name of the API is going to be. Where is it going to come from? It's going to come from the Northwind DB context, which is here, which has all of the code to actually go query it. And then what am I returning? Alphabetical list of products to list. So if I go here and I go to definition, I've got the alphabetical list of products, and it is going to get the alphabetical list of products from the database. So it's very easy to do this. The one thing that you need to, one of the things that you need to kind of remember or find on the internet is just this format, and it's in the Microsoft Docs. It's a little buried. But if I just copy this and I'll paste it into everyone here, and I'll type it in, just copy that out, because everything is really easy up until that point, which is kind of cool. So, all right. So now that we got that done, I've deployed this to Azure, and I'm not going to go through all that stuff because the key thing here is this URL. So now let me go into the app builder. And if you're not familiar with the app builder, I'm going to go to the Infragistics homepage, and I'm going to go to design and development, and I'm going to go to app builder. And then here I'm going to sign in. And now I'm signed into the app builder. I can use my Google ID, my Microsoft ID, my Apple ID, or my Infragistics ID. Let's use the Infragistics ID. And now I'm into my homepage, my workbench of everything. So these are the apps that I've already worked on, right? So I've got a bunch of different things here. You can see here, I've got a bunch of different workspaces. So security is based on the workspace, makes it really easy. So for example, let's say Brian and I were working on a project. I could create a workspace called Brian, and then I could take something from my workspace, click copy to workspace, and then I will be able to copy it over, including all of the assets and things like that. So let's go ahead and do a new app. You've got some templates here, actually some sample apps, but the cool thing is last week we released a bunch of new templates. So please take a look at these templates. We took like 400 or 500 different applications from customers, and we kind of boiled it down to a handful or two of templates that these applications look like. Now, you might be like, wait, my application looks different. Great, tell us, and we'll add more templates. The nice thing is we're adding a feature that you can create a template based on your own application and save it here. So you'll be able to save it for your own team or to the public. What I'm going to do is just do a blank application. And then the other cool thing we did was we added these pre-baked layouts. So developers, especially coming from Windows Forms WPF, do not want to learn CSS. They don't want to learn layout and all this other stuff. We get it. So we created these layouts that will just let you kind of drop things in. So here I'll do a 2-row split bottom row. And now I've got this layout. Now you can imagine in your app that this is probably a grid, right? And that grid has a height and a width of 100%. And then over here could be some other thing. I'm going to say it's going to be a card view. And then over here might be a chart, or it could be another grid. So let's do another grid here. And I'm going to say this grid should be 100%, and this grid should be 100%. And in fact, I'm going to just do 3 grids because that's kind of cool. So, and in fact, I'm just going to copy this grid. So you can see I can Control C, Control V. So now it's all there. Life is good. All right. So I want to go to the cloud and get some of that data that we have up in Azure. So I'm going to click REST API. You can see here, this is the new feature that was added, the Open API, e.g. Swagger support. So let's call this webinar demo. And I'm going to use Open API. You can add a URL or just upload that Swagger definition file. So I'm going to use a URL. Let me go back to wherever the heck I happen to have that URL. Maybe I'll just type this in again. And I got this. I'm going to copy this link. This is the link that matters, not this link, but the actual JSON link that has the Open API specification. That's what you need. So I'm going to paste this in. And now watch what happens. We're going off, we're querying it. And it says, okay, I've got this endpoint swagger.json. Now let's configure those endpoints. So now this is just like another visualizer of that API. This is the way Swagger does it on the web. This is the way App Builder does it inside the App Builder. So for example, I can click on customers here and it updated this URL. I can send this off to the server to test. I can view details like what the response content looks like and what I should expect in my app. I can view the response headers, etc. And then if I click the checkbox here, I am good to go. So in the case of customers, I'm going to leave that there. Now, the other nice thing is we support parameterized queries. So here, customer order details, customer order history. I can test this out. I'll type in Alfke and I'll send that along. And then, yeah, I'm going to get Alfke's stuff back. So there's that. And we'll do one more. let's just do products, I guess. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to say select data. And now here it allows you to determine what fields you want to use when you bind the data. So I'm just going to say select all on all these guys like so. And then I'm done with that. If I go to the data tab here, which I'm already at, let me make this a little bit shorter. There's my webinar demo. It's got the APIs that I'm looking for and then the fields. So now all I have to do is bind this to data. So let me go to data, webinar demo, customers, and we'll do webinar demo, customer order history, and we'll go here to webinar demo and we'll do products. So the way that you bind data, I don't know why this guy doesn't have any data. Let's go to categories here. Okay, there we go. That's using a different data source. But all you need to do on any data bound control is go to its properties, and you're going to see here you've got different properties. And then the other thing you can do is click the plus sign and then add some of these features. Now, keep in mind that Blazor is still in like beta, and we're going to RTM it. The official date is like last week of April, but our 22.1 release is the second week of May, and everything will be wrapped up by then. But you know, within the next month, all the Blazor stuff will be removed, the Blazor code gen. But here, if I go to preview, you can see here that I've got my data. They're in all these nice grids. All of the grid definitions are here. And in fact, this is Angular. I'm going to change this over to Blazor. And you can see that I've got the same stuff, but although right here in Blazor. And then the difference between the beta in Blazor and Angular is in Blazor, we didn't create a separate services class yet, which I believe is the approach that we're going to take when we RTM this. But you can see that it is doing exactly what I did in the code, except it's not doing it on the grid itself. It just has an override on initialize async, and it's going off to the cloud, and it's pointing to these URLs, and it's going to go ahead and get that data. So if I click edit here, I'm going to change this to webinar demo today, and I'm going to download this guy. So I download my zip, and here I'm going to copy this over to, let's put it right here, paste, let me unzip, and let's run this guy in Visual Studio. It's all on my other screen now. I'm going to move it over. There we go. All right, so what we do now is we let you create those screens, and then you can do whatever you want in App Builder, add your pages, do whatever the heck you want. Here's my master view. This is exactly what you saw in the code preview. If I click these guys, they go right to the cloud to get, you can view the data that we're going to get. And the reason this is neat is because you're actually building a real app that has real data from the cloud. And this is your real app, right? You're not, you know, it's not a static JSON file. This is real live SQL data. So, or whatever, it's in Azure. So whatever your data is in Azure, this is a web API fronting that in Visual Studio with a web API app, and it's just deployed to Azure. So with that, like no lines of code, didn't have to do anything. The next thing I would do, because we're not quite there yet with App Builder, is on the master detail side. It's a feature that I'm going to guess, and George can chime in, July timeframe, George, maybe we'll have master detail. But it's something that we are working on. So you can just kind of link together different controls by primary and foreign key, and then we'll auto generate the code for you. But in the meantime, take a look at last week's or the webinar from 2 weeks ago, because that's what we did. All right, so that gives us our, we're at 30 minutes. That's basically what I wanted to show today. I really wanted to highlight Blazor. in general. So I know I spent probably 10 or 12 or minutes or so on not the app builder, but what we've done with Blazor in general is pretty cool with some of these, little delighters in terms of very quickly being able to bind data and test things out. I don't have to go ahead and write all this code because I just want to show data in a chart or in a grid. Can you make it easy for me? And in general, App Builder will do it as well for free, but sometimes you don't need to use App Builder. Maybe you don't want to. I personally use App Builder for everything. I'm no CSS guru. And so my favorite new feature, and I can't thank, George enough, and Andy, who also worked on this, and the whole team, is the ability to just pick layout. So here, if I add a child view, I've got my child view. I'm going to pick a layout. I want this to be a side-by-side, and now I'm done, right? And then what George and team are working on now is, you can see I added my grid, but some controls, we can assume that you want them to fill the container, right? So if I say unset, grow, like, all right, imagine having to know that in CSS. Like, I don't know that stuff. I got to ask people. But what we're going to do is we're going to automatically size the components to the container if it makes sense. So what makes sense? I think a grid might make sense. The other one that might make sense is a card view. Now, a card view could be data bound or not. I'm going to click data, and you can see it did categories, but it like gives all the categories. Let's go to something like products. And maybe I don't want the default. Like, in my mind, the card view default should always flow, right? But in order to make that work, I need to go to the container, and I need to tell it to wrap, right? So you can see now that it's going to wrap. And in fact, if we have more, let's just go to customers, and let's change this to like 20. You'll see that we have a wrap now. And what's going to happen is I can tell it the next step to either wrap up and down or side to side. So do I want it to be a row or a column? So we're going to start to make some of these more defaults, like what makes sense, and then we'll get feedback. But we really want to make it where you're not thinking. It just kind of click, 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 bind data, done. Then you can move on. All right, so looks like you've got, thank you, George and Brian, all the questions. Man, there's a lot of questions. It looks like they're all answered. Yeah, so let's go back to the slides. And I got one more slide here. And it is YouTube Live. We do YouTube Live every other week. So we do a webinar every other week, and then in the off week, we do a YouTube Live. So go to Infragistics YouTube channel and just subscribe to it. And then if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get an update or an alert. Then our next webinar, we believe, is not at the end of April, because I think we got some folks on vacation and whatnot, like me, maybe. So we're going to do it with the 22.1 launch. So either the first week in May or the second week in May. We'll still do the YouTube Lives. And if there is, if I'm going to be here, we'll definitely do a webinar. Yeah, that's what's next. And of course, email me with questions, email Brian, any one of us with questions. And then to get to App Builder, go to infragistics.com, go to the first main menu and select App Builder. It's the top item off of the main menu, and sign up for a trial today. And that's it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next webinar.